Kindly sit. Sorry, little late because I was stuck in some. You can still see I had to fight against the pollution and traffic. Okay, so today is our first session. Obviously, I will not be teaching you, so you are spared of that problem. But today we will talk about the basic nuances of public administration. First of all, let me congratulate you that you opted for PubAd. Is it a good news? Okay. So why did you opt for PubAd? You like it? Or somebody told you don't opt for it, but you are a rebel? And that means you are elite. PubAd is an elite subject. Okay, that is why we are a little different class in the preparation of UPSC. Okay, and why is that? There are certain reasons for that. Okay, so we'll talk over all of them. Have you gone through the syllabus of PubAd? Okay, so how did you feel? Did you read any other subject syllabus? Like? Physics, Pol Science. Anybody? Anybody from any other humanities stream who has opted for PubAd? Okay, Pol Science? History. Okay, most of you are engineers? Right. But you see, the dominance of people from non-humanities background in PubAd is always visible. Okay, since the inception in 1987, if you all know, that was the time when PubAd was introduced. So the basic purpose of this paper was obviously to integrate the theory and the practice of administration. If you read history, I won't say it has no benefits, but if you read history, obviously the practical administrative situation might be very different, even though it will help you to understand the basic socio-cultural aspects of a particular place, or physics for that matter, mathematics, so, or literature. So definitely they expand your intellectual horizon, but they don't give you specific solutions, okay, or you can say the intuitive knowledge to give solutions to administrative problems. So PubAd has that utility, no doubt, and you can see from 2001 to almost 2010, for 9 years, it was the public administration. Okay, almost 10 years, a decade of PubAd. Every second person had the public administration, but that was the time, obviously, when we had two optionals. Okay, I myself appeared for 4 attempts, all from PubAd and physics, and last 2 attempts with PubAd and sociology. Okay, obviously, PubAd helped me every time. In physics, I scored 226, in spite of being from an engineering background. And I used to think I know physics very well, but I scored 308 in PubAd. Then I realized better to switch from physics to PubAd. Okay, and eventually I went on to score one of the highest, that is 367 in public administration. It was more than the top ranker that year. Shubhra Saxena was rank 1. Okay, she got 348, I got 367. Okay, but she scored very well in other option, I did not. Fine. So if I see my journey of public administration, okay, it has always been, you can say, positive. It has never been pessimistic. But after 2011, if you see, the public administration question paper and its orientation has totally changed. Now, why did this happen? Okay, that is also, if you go and see the UPSC report, you will find that almost in mains in 2011, 15,000 people or 13,000 some people appeared. Out of that, almost 6,700 from PubAd. That is almost half of the population, okay, from the public administration. Now, what does it indicate? Now, this exam is not just selection, it is also elimination. And obviously, if the UPSC submits a report to the president and the president causes it to be laid in the parliament, then what happens? People will ask that why everybody is from the public administration. Also, number of other committees were formed, like second ARC. Labasna had presented a report to the UPSC that the kind of students we are getting from certain areas, okay, they are not worthy of being the civil servant. So public administration had become such a phenomenon that anybody opting and studying for 2.5 months was scoring marks in public administration. So obviously they raised the bar of the question paper. Okay. Also somebody brought about the gossip that there is a hidden syllabus. Okay, it was not a hidden syllabus, it was basically an alternative syllabus given by one of the members. Okay, made by an IIM professor and UGC. If you go and see the UGC net syllabus, you will find those elements which were there in the hidden syllabus. Okay, so they made an alternative syllabus that, okay, this is much more dynamic syllabus than what we are doing today. Today we are more focused on the theory. So let us change the orientation. But it was leaked by somebody. Okay, it was a deputy secretary. I know the name also. Fine, an inquiry was instituted by the UPSC against him. So he leaked it and many of the coaching institutes got it. So, but obviously few questions were visible in 2013 and 14 from that hidden syllabus. But obviously UPSC, unless it formally accepts the syllabus, it will not give the questions. So even if you had not studied the hidden syllabus, you could have done very well because you had the option to leave those questions. You know what is the format of the exam, so we'll start with that. Okay. So okay, if we talk about public administration, you know every optional has 2 papers. These basic things, you might have done the research. 250. 250. Now there is a big difference between these 2 papers. So today our entire discussion would be regarding this paper. Okay, why this paper is important? Have you read the syllabus properly? How many units are there? 12 units. Okay, what is there in paper 1? You've read the syllabus, you told me. No, how do you comprehend the entire paper? What exactly it wants you to know? Theories. Have you studied mathematics at your class 10th level? You must have, all of you. Do you know what is Pythagoras theorem? What is it? Can you prove it? No, you can. I'm asking in general. Everybody knows the theorem. Can you prove it? So the logic is, when we conclude something, okay, there must be some theoretical and conceptual knowledge behind it. Fine. So you can say that administration needs accountability, transparency, it must be a good administration. But then we have to understand and deduce that process what is good. You have to conclude, and when you have to conclude, you require something to be understood. Fine. So the moment or before you claim something that public administration is this, it is an organization, it is an activity, it is a function, then how did you arrive at this conclusion? That means what? There must be some conceptual theory behind it. Fine. So your paper 1 is dealing with this aspect. All the knowledge that you will gather, the theoretical knowledge, the vocabulary of public administration, any concept that you will study, that will be derived from this paper. So this paper, you can understand, is the basis of understanding the entire public administration process. You understand the process and the procedure? What is the difference? Because our first 2 classes would be on that only. What is the vocabulary of Unit 1 or Paper 1? Unit 1 is the most important area in Paper 1. So if you know the entire vocabulary of the Paper 1, the moment we'll start studying, it will simplify things for you. You can read any book you want. I would not tell you go and read this book, this book. Once you do this class, you don't need to read any book. But I would always say read at least 2 books. Develop your base from certain books. But any book you read after those classes, you will be able to read. Fine. So when I'm saying paper 1 is the most important area. Most of the people, obviously they fail to score very high in paper 1 because of lack of conceptual clarity. So if you know what is the basic process behind the Pythagoras theorem, you can always solve it. Even if you don't remember, you can derive it. Okay, that is the beauty of paper 1. Now what is there in paper 1? Now see the average score of paper 1 prior to 2011. The average score was somewhere 160. Any good student, okay, out of 300 I'm talking about, fine. So any good student who would understand the concepts very well, even without mugging or rote learning, he can score 160 marks. That is almost more than 50%. Now, the marks in paper 1 are reducing. Okay. Even paper 2 they are reducing. Obviously, overall marks are reducing, but not this year. People have scored. Okay, there is a student, Jitendra, who has scored 301 marks. Okay, even though paper 2 his marks are less, 144, but paper 1 it is very high. Why? So anybody who wants to score in this paper, and if you understand conceptually this paper, obviously you can increase the overall score in public administration. Okay, but don't take paper 2 also casually. We'll deal with that also. But here it is easy for you to score. Why? Because things are what they are. If I come to paper 2, okay, I'll deal with that separately, but just for a reference, if I talk about Indian administration, governance, corruption, reforms, okay, social justice, what are these kind of areas? These areas are highly subjective in nature. Now you say women empowerment must be done this way, and the examiner says, okay, this person has not used this aspect, okay, or this aspirant does not know, okay, the utility of this particular policy. That means what? It is highly subjective. You need to be highly on toes to deal with paper 2. Whereas in paper 1, the things are more or less static. Okay, that is why it is easy to score this paper, but it is difficult to understand this paper. Why? Because in public administration paper 2, you are studying your general studies, you are studying current affairs, you are studying newspapers, so you have content. The only thing is you need to know how to write this content. Whereas in paper 1, you have to go and conceptually understand the public administration and its undercurrents. For example, we say honesty is the best policy. How can you interpret this statement? How do you interpret this statement? Honesty is the best policy. Is it? Don't be so honest in your interview. They want you to be manipulative. What is bureaucracy about? It is a sophisticated diplomacy. Okay. So, honesty is the best way. Now there are numerous interpretations of that. One is the textual interpretation, the way it is written. Just elaborate it. One is the undercurrent. Then there will be various layers of undercurrent. Now that is what paper 1 is. And that is why most of these students fail to understand paper 1. Because they understand one dimension, they interpret the textual aspect, but they don't go behind that. And so, paper 1, focus on paper 1, don't leave any aspect of paper 1. Okay, even in paper 2, certain areas may overlap, paper 2 areas may overlap with general studies paper. Okay, but that is also a mistake. In general studies, we are writing more of the factual aspect. In public administration paper 2, it is not factual aspect. Fine. So let us start with our discussion on paper 1. Fine. So you need 300 plus 2. You can easily get 300 plus, there is no problem. And good student can always get 275 in PubAd, and they have always got, except for 2 years, 13 and 14. Okay, then also some students got good marks. Okay, so your score or your target must be 300 at least, or 275 and above. Okay, how can you do this? Consistently you have to write the answers. Okay, that is inbuilt in this course. We have designed it that way so that you keep writing, but write it honestly. Okay, don't just submit or copy it from someone. Okay, but if you write consistently, okay, and let us say you understand over a time that how your newspaper will be added to that, definitely you can score these many marks. At least I am saying. Fine, let us go. So be motivated and committed. Okay, it is a collective effort. Okay, it's not just a dialogue between me and you. It is like a collective process, okay, for some higher purpose, that is protecting the status of public administration. Okay, let us deal with paper 1 then. See though. Now your paper 1 starts with the first unit, which is the most important. Now there is a way of dealing with this unit. Now this unit is about the evolution of public administration. Now see, this very first word in the syllabus we can interpret in multiple ways. Now, evolution of public administration, what does it mean? Is it talking about public administration as a subject? Now you can interpret in two ways. One, simply the subject which you are going to study, or the discipline. You understand the difference between these two? What is subject, what is discipline? Which one is more advanced? Discipline. So what is the difference between these two? Last year there was a question that a particular development in public administration, better to call it as an approach, not a theory. There was a question like this. So sometimes they are more concerned with the directly asking the theoretical aspects. Okay. If we differentiate, now subject obviously is a well-developed collection of ideas, principles, theories, defining a particular domain of study. Okay, let's say administration, sociology, anything. So a particular domain of study which is well defined through theories, principles and ideas is a subject. What is a discipline? Now discipline is more evolved. It develops its own independent principles. Okay, discipline has its own independent principles. It can isolate itself from the other disciplines. For example, when you say mathematics, now mathematics cannot be understood without deriving certain knowledge from the physics, or physics cannot be understood without mathematics. But when we are using the term discipline, we are talking about its identity, standalone identity, independent. So it has evolved to that extent that it is independent now. Fine. So there are many questions which are asked on this idea, that whether PubAd can be called as a discipline or it is merely a subject. Fine. So we are talking about one aspect in the evolution is about the subject which we are going to study, what is our syllabus. The other aspect is the activity. You not only study administration, you also do administration. So administration is what something which we do to achieve certain ends. Now who does administration? We or somebody? Okay, it is the state. Fine. So the idea of public administration as an activity, as something which we do, okay, is always to be understood with respect to a state. Okay, so in paper 1, unit 1, this aspect is the most important. Okay. Now see, when we deal with this part, evolution, okay, it has dominantly Western tone. Okay, it has a Western bias because it is derived mostly from the USA and the European countries. There is technically no study of public administration theories and principles derived from Asian perspective or from India, except Kautilya's Arthashastra or Mahabharata. There is one treatise in Mahabharata, Shanti Parv, talks about certain principles. But you see, logically, all the knowledge that we will talk about in paper 1 is derived from the Western. Now, what is the problem in understanding this? Because we are situated in a non-Western country or in a non-Western culture. So, whatever you will read here, okay, you will have to link it to the Indian context. Now, this is the first thing which is mandatory in studying paper 1, that unless you keep linking this to this, whatever you study will remain only in theory. You will not be able to practically visualize it. Okay, Taylor, Fayol, there are a number of theorists. So, you have to visualize them in the practical aspect. And this is simply known as, which students are bothered about, the linkage. Fine. So, this is how we will start with the evolution now. The UPSC does not specify that evolution of public administration and its status till present. What is the meaning of present? Today, 2 years back, 3 years back, when? Okay, so obviously for safety, we take it 2018, the year in which we are studying it. So there are a number of developments which you will not find in the book, because they might have been edited over a period of time, but they may not contain the peculiar aspects which are being evolving today also. For that, we need to refer certain sources beyond the book. But that effort I will do, you don't have to worry. But you cannot ignore that when it is saying till present means something which is today also. So in the Indian context, you can understand it from the newspapers, Indian Institute of Public Administration journals are there. We can understand. But in the non-Western, it is very difficult. But there is a website, UNPAN, to which you will keep referring. Okay. I will be giving the inputs in the class, but you kindly keep referring by yourself. United Nations Public Administration Network. IDSA, Indian Defence Studies Analysis Institute. IDSA website, and CGG, Center for Good Governance. Now these are important websites which you need to visit, okay, especially when we are dealing with this part. So what we have done now, see. So we'll study evolution. Now in the evolution, okay, Western bias is visible. So our evolution does not start from Wilson's essay. Generally people with it is also written in your syllabus. Wilson's study of administration and his essay. But generally people start from the Wilson, it is not right. We will not start from Wilson, but we will start from the emergence of public administration in Europe. Because all the Wilson's ideas were borrowed from European context. So instead of directly knowing Wilson, we will talk about this first. Then after this, if you remember or if you know Napoleon, what is the specific contribution of Napoleon to public administration? Codification of laws. Okay. He developed codes for civil services, which the same codes are being used today also. Okay. So once we understand the context of the actual emergence of public administration in the European societies, then we'll move on to the study of American Constitution or the formation of American Constitution. Why? Because this is the context in which we have to study public administration. Okay. And this context is democracy. We are not much concerned in our syllabus with the study of autocracies or monarchies or dictatorial regimes or communisms, even though their reference will come. But whatever syllabus is given, it is mostly with context to democracy. So this is how we start the evolution now. So there are numerous developments that we'll incorporate over the time. Now if you see the tone of the Unit 1. Now Unit 1, when I say evolution of PubEd from beginning till present. Now can you understand that the entire paper 1 can be linked to this? All your 12 units can be studied in this entire unit. Why we do this? There is a reason. Once you study various aspects in isolation, in the end, if I tell you, okay, link this unit with this unit, okay, then you have to think a lot. Okay, you'll pressurize your nerves. So rather than what you do, in the beginning itself, we start by linking everything in one unit. So the moment we complete the first unit, your almost 70% of paper 1 is completed. And that is the best strategy. You go and see the last 10 years questions, we'll discuss them in the class. You'll find that in last 10 years, most of the complicated questions which have been asked, they are those where Unit 1 was linked with Unit 7, Unit 8 is linked with Unit 3 and likewise. So why to go through that struggle? We are doing it in the beginning itself. Fine. So that is why it takes very long time. So what we do, we divide the evolution into phases right from the beginning. Generally it is started with Wilson. So from here we divide it into 6 phases given by a person known as Nicholas Henry. I am not getting into the text today, only for the reference. So we divide it into phases, and till 1990 he has categorized the evolution of PubEd, but we go beyond this also. So we can add today number of phases to that. And through this what happens, your Unit 2, Unit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All the aspects given in these 8 units, they are integrated here. Okay. 9, 10, 11, 12, they are little discrete. Okay, few of them may be linked with paper 2, fine, and then we study. So this is our mode of study, and now Many students are concerned with the reference. Okay, so paper 2 is mostly theory dominated. Okay, mostly the students ask for what book we should read for theories, and they assume that paper 1 is entire theories only. It is not correct. Okay, it is not just about theories and some theorists. Paper 1 is about the understanding or the basic understanding of what we are going to study, the public administration. Now I visualize administration, let us say, in a different way. Okay, you are moving on the road, moment you see an accident or a red light not working or potholes on the road, what do? You do anything? No. You are a highly alert citizen. You are conscious of your own comfort. So you don't do, you are an educated person, you don't do anything. Are you tempted to do something? Complain. To whom? Now you don't know that. No, definitely. You might be willing, but probably you might not know it. So when we are studying administration, whatever we are studying, we have to every day visualize it. And that is how we can connect the dots in paper 1. So the moment I say bureaucracy, okay, that is the most controversial term in the entire public administration, bureaucracy. What do you understand by bureaucracy? You want to be part of bureaucracy? No. You want to be part of civil services, not the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is a negative term. The moment you say a bureaucrat, you have a visualization of the bureaucrat. He is a person who comes late to the office, goes early. He has a paunch. He doesn't drive his car. He just sits in the back of the seat. Okay, does nothing, seems to be busy. Now that is a visualization of a typical bureaucrat. Okay. And in a lifetime you will not, unless you become one, you will not be happy meeting a bureaucrat. Because he is more procedure. Fine. So you have, whatever we are doing here, you have to visualize it every day. And over the time you have to develop your vocabulary like that. If you are talking amongst yourself, talk in the vocabulary of PUBAD. Okay. Did you see how governance is going on? Okay. What was written yesterday in the editorial, was it something related to good governance or not? Now see, if you follow this process, whatever shocks you experience in the exam will not be there. Your fear of the terminology, okay, that is one very important area which we don't focus even as teachers, even as students. We take a dictionary and go and read it. Oh, that is not how we understand it. So we have to visualize every day. We are using a term governance. What do you mean by it? Whatever we are doing, studying, training, incorporating ethics, and ethics paper, ethics as a subject, okay, it's all for the governance. What is governance? What is government?
A group of institutions like parliament, judiciary.
In common sense terms, do we call judiciary as part of government?
No, sir, but actually it is a part of government. Because we dealing with executives.
You're correct. No, you're right. But when I say government, I look up to Modi or Kejriwal or Yogi. I look up to them. The moment I say government did not do this, okay, there is a traffic jam on the highway. Government. So who is the government? The executive. What you are saying is the state. Okay, so there is a difference between these two. So when we talk about government, government is a system. Like family. Family has been created as a system. There is a, if there are no parents, can you call that as a family? No. So family has a typical structure. There will be two people and children, or maybe a joint family structure. Then there will be grandparents also. So that means what? The moment you say family, something you visualize. This is the structure. How their relationships have evolved on certain basis. Emotions, affection, okay, blood relations. So there is also a basis of this structure. Okay, structure is like a pattern. Anything that we do is in a structure. Same way, we have created society. Society created the political system, the economic system to achieve certain ends which it had, whatever ends it wanted to fulfill. Out of that, the political system becomes very important. Why? Because it is related to power, authority. To do anything, you require an authority. Now what is power? See, I did not tell you I will teach, but I am teaching actually. What is power? Whom would you prefer, a person going to the gym every day or a person going to the library? What you would want to be? Going to the library? Both. So there is a physical power and there is a intellectual power. So this is difference is that muscular power and intelligence both come in work, no doubt. But the power will only be visible when it is relative. So you say somebody has huge, chiseled body only when you compare it to some okay, yes. Or when you see somebody's brute power, the physical power, only when he exercises it on somebody. So power is a relative concept. So society, it creates a system where it says that okay, take whatever power we have, the physical power, the collective power, okay, and now you use this power for us. So this process, when we are giving the power to a system, and obviously why we'll give and how we'll give? We'll give it for some purpose. Okay, that means it will be restricted for certain use. And how we'll give it? Simply we'll go together and say that okay, no Modi, you take this power and exercise. How will you do it? You will legitimize it. Some contract, some document, some framework, you have to do, that is constitution. So you legitimize this power, and that legitimate power is known as authority. Authority is something which has been given to you by some legitimate means to be exercised. So you cannot understand the role of public administration unless you know what is authority and what is power. And why should we accept the administration as the main instrument of bringing change in the society? So we have collectively accepted that okay, yes, you are the state, you are the political system, you are the government, now you use any mechanism you want. And what is the mechanism? The bureaucracy. But bureaucracy is not the positive term, it is a negative term. There was a theorist Weber who made it positive in motion. So understanding the moment we say government, that means the government is what? Government is now the system which has been given the power to run the society. But this power can be used in a good way, in a bad way. Well, while we're giving the power, we assume that these people will use it for good purpose, but they may use it for bad purpose also. Then what we'll do? We must have a mechanism to take that power or control that power, whatever. Now comes your judicial system. That means we create some other organs also in case the violation takes place, the deviation takes place. So the way the power is exercised, good way or bad way. Okay, when we study this aspect, that is known as governance. When we study only the system, that how we will give the power, how this power will be exercised, who will exercise this power, this study is the study of government. But how the power will be exercised in the society, what will be the process, whether it will be bad, good, okay, beneficial, okay, against the will of the people, how it will be or how it is being done. Both, when we study this aspect, that is governance. So governance is process, government is system. So your entire study of public administration, when we start, we visualize it at the study of governance. Our purpose is what? To know how the government functions and how the government can or functioning can be improved further. Right. So your unit 1 or paper 1 is mostly concerned with the study of various aspects and processes which were dominated or which dominated the Western public administration. Now the second question comes that why should we study this Western public administration? Because nobody brought any other perspective. There are certain reasons for that. Okay. When Gutenberg made the printing press, when did he do it? Will that have some impact on the knowledge and transmission of knowledge? Did the evolution of printing press contribute to the evolution of knowledge? Yes. We were writing on Bhojpatras. You know what is a Bhojpatra? Birch tree, have you heard of it? Right. So we were writing on the Bhojpatra. Now how can we compile first of all this document? How can we make it mobile enough to be carried from here to there? How can we preserve it? So it was difficult for us to transmit that knowledge. So most of the knowledge in the non-Western tradition was given orally. Shrutis and Smritis, have you heard of? Indian context, we use the term. And so the logic was that why Western knowledge spread. One was that it was printed. It was mobile enough to be carried from here to there. And also, obviously, their societies were more or less going through a dynamic phase. Industrialization was one of the important factors behind that. So economically, they evolved faster than us. So whatever knowledge they developed, probably you can say it was basically experience based, but their experience was more than us. At least that is the assumption. Right? That is why we have to understand the Western context of PubEd. Now there is a doubt that whenever a question is asked in the UPSC, okay, and that is coming from the Western context of public administration, okay, how do we interpret it? Shall we use the Indian context? Definitely. That is what I told you, that unless you write the Indian context in the paper 1, you will not get marks. Because the examiner assumes that you have studied the theories and concepts and now you are trying to understand how they are useful for Indian administration. Okay, so this is like a golden rule. Whatever answer we write in paper 1, we must always add the aspects of Indian administration or the issues in Indian administration to conclude or to justify whatever arguments we are giving. So when we deal with paper 1 now, so the first part we'll focus is the vocabulary. Okay, now this is our initiation into paper 1, the vocabulary of public administration. So there are 12 units, obviously we cannot go and read the vocabulary of each and every unit, but yes, there are some definite important terms, okay, based on which and only after that we can understand even the evolution of PubEd. So I would deal with few terms today just to give you an idea, okay, that how we are going to deal with them. And then I'll tell you the structure of paper 1. Let us say, in your unit 1, there are a few important terms. The first term that we study is the approach. Even before we study what is public administration, we study what is an approach. Okay. A theory, okay, a concept, paradigm. A system. Now this is just an indicative list. I am not writing the entire one. We will start it next week. Fine. So if I use the first term that we study is the approach. What is an approach? How did you approach, or what was your approach regarding the selection of the subject? What did you do? You read the syllabus, right?
What are the steps that you do in order to initiate something?
Correct. Right. So everybody will have a different approach of seeing the same thing, of choosing the subject. Okay, everybody will follow a different approach, will it or not? That means you are trying to say that to understand the same phenomena, people will use different frameworks. Are you understanding this? It is very simple, correct. So once we say public administration, now there are numerous approaches to understand the public administration. Okay. And these approaches later got translated into theories which you study, Taylor, Fayol, Weber, whatever. Right. So unless you understand that, okay, what was the framework in which they were viewing the public administration, till that time you cannot understand what theories they developed. Okay. So approach is like a framework, and it is not a simple framework, it is a conceptual framework. It comes with certain assumptions. Okay, whatever theorist, whosoever develops a knowledge, he has certain assumptions. For example, you say that this is the shortest route from here to there, okay, or from this metro pillar to that red light, this is the shortest route. How do you come to this conclusion? that this is the shortest route. So you must also follow the longer routes. Unless you compare this route with the other routes, how can you say that this is the shortest route? That means the people who derived a particular approach or who use particular approaches, they might have compared some other approaches. Or whatever the conclusions they drew while studying public administration, okay, it must be based on either their experience or on research or some fact or data. Understanding? Without this, you cannot arrive at a conclusion. Otherwise, you will not be a theorist, you will be a layman. Fine, layman say no that, oh, he is the best. Okay, topper ne ye kiya. Okay, topper said, okay, I studied 18 hours a day. How many days can you study 18 hours a day? So when you come into Rajan Nagar, the first thing you do is make a timetable. Okay, once you settle down, then you make a timetable. Then initially timetable is of 21 hours, 20 hours, I suppose. At least every student makes a timetable of 18 to 20 hours. Then after a week, he knows that, okay, this is not going to happen. Then it gets reduced to 14 hours. Then you decide that I will do it 14 hours, whatever happens. Then probably 3, 4, 5 days you try it and you also follow the decorum. But after a few days, somebody comes and says, oh, that boy studied 8 hours and he got through. Suddenly you reduce it. It is Bewkufi. Fine. So the logic is that anybody who comes to a conclusion, it is either by experience or by fact or by some empirical research. Without that you cannot come. So these people made certain assumptions, which you call as hypothesis. Now don't assume I am teaching physics, because when we go to comparative public administration, public policy, development administration and various other approaches, okay, number of questions are derived from this idea. That using a hypothesis, we make certain assumptions, okay, and we try to prove them. Now how an hypothesis works? So I say that from this metro pillar to that street light, okay, it is the shortest distance. Now how will I prove it? So if I say I am a good person, will I prove it that I am a good person? By assuming that I am good, will I prove I am good? I will assume I am the worst. And then I will deny this fact. You understand? This is how simply we prove it. So anybody who has developed a hypothesis or certain assumptions in public administration also, okay, they all have first tried to prove it for its falsifiability. They wanted to prove it wrong. When they could not, then they accepted it is right. Okay, why it is important? Because there are numerous approaches around which number of questions in paper 1 are asked. So there are various approaches which various people used, and number of theorists came. Now once we study their writings, their theories or whatever they develop, okay, we can club them into one dominant approach. Okay, so one of the first most important approaches in public administration is the positivism. Your Taylor, Fayol, Weber, Gulick, Urwick, even Wilson, all of them come, okay, or all of them use this approach, or they come from the tradition of positivism. So this is the most important first word. Before you know PubAd, you must know this. Okay, what is positivism? You all are positivist. Do you evaluate things rationally or emotionally? Both? How did your parents nurture you for civil services? Did they nurture you or you nurtured yourself? My father was feeding me with this idea for a long time. He used to give me a competition success review, a magazine used to come long back. Now it is not there, I think. Not read now. Fine. So in CSR there was one column, Topper Speaks, something like this. So since my class 9th he used to give me this. You can read it once, you can read it once. Okay. Now see, it was like indoctrination. Okay, maybe I would have been a better engineer. Okay, but obviously it was fed to me. So you see, logically, okay, whatever approach you develop, whatever the way you see the world, depends upon various factors. Not just your knowledge or your factual knowledge that you gather, but also your emotional, cultural influences. Fine. But positivism rules this out. Positivism is that idea which says that whatever knowledge we develop, or whatever is the knowledge, or that can be called as the knowledge, is something which is derived from the facts. Anything that we call as knowledge must be based on facts and not on anything else. But positivism believe that how to know these facts. Let us say this is a duster. Is it a fact? Is it a fact? It is a material thing. Is it a fact? You are not sure this is a fact? This is a class. It is a person or not a ghost. Okay. At least these are some facts you can accept. But how did you accept that this is a duster? No, that's fine. But somebody told you duster rubs. If I say this is a pen and this is a duster. Okay, if I had indoctrinated you this way, then you would have said this is a duster. So the logic is that the terms we use, that itself is a concept. The language that we use is itself a concept. So the moment I say a word, I visualize it. Okay, good will mean this, bad will mean this. Now what is it? This is positivism. We have defined things in rigid boundaries. Okay, that is how we made the facts. Okay, I'll simplify it, don't worry. So if I say facts, anything or any knowledge that we derive comes from the facts. How to know that this is a fact? How to even say that this is a fact? Because so many people are saying, so it is a fact. No, anything that is, let's say, what will be the most elementary understanding? Anything which is perceptible by our sensory perceptions. Anything that can be understood, felt, touched, physically seen, okay, is a fact. That means it is there, you are saying it is fact. So the positivist theorists or this development, okay, believed in facts, and how these facts, something which was subject to sensory perception. As simple as that. Their idea was anything that you visualize through sensory perception will be a fact, and that fact will be the knowledge. Finish. But there are so many things which are apart from these facts, which are beyond our sensory perceptions. We call them as ESP, extrasensory perception, God. Or we call them as metaphysical, which is beyond. Okay. So at the night you travel alone. You know the fact is that there is nobody on the road, but still you don't accept it. That is the best time to go when there is no traffic, nobody on the road. But you will be scared to go. Why is that? Apart from the fact there is something which exists. Let us call it anything. Okay. In terms of the scientific understanding of a subject or public administration theory, that something is called as values, which is subject to our emotion, our culture, our faith, our belief, but not fact. Anything which is deriving its existence from certain things which are intangible, all that is value. If you feel something differently about this thing, you feel it differently, these two are values. What you feel or both of you feel the same about this particular thing, that is a fact. Have you understood this thing? Have you understood? Okay, then this is the most complicated thing in PubEd. If you understood, then almost you can understand the unit 1. Right. So fact and value, this is a complicated idea. But see, there we can say this is fact, this is fact, this is fact. But whatever is happening in the society, whatever administration is trying to study, okay, they are not always facts. A major part of that is value. Modi has made so many schemes. Okay, budget has been allocated to them. But what is the public perception? What is public perception regarding Kejriwal? What is your perception? Is the public perception built on facts or values? Both, combination, but dominantly on values. Why? Because we have, let's say, an illiterate society. a non-rational society which believes its leaders and politicians, media. So whatever media says, whatever fake news comes, you believe it or you go and verify it. You don't verify it, most of that you accept it. That means you are not a positivist. Understanding logic of positivism. So it is saying whatever knowledge we have must be on the facts, not on the values. But when we talk about society and the problems of governance like equity, justice, inclusion, you understand what is inclusion? What is it? Now we can include those sections of society which have been marginalized, either because of social taboos or so many, whatever the basis be. Fine. So inclusion, justice, happiness, public interest, satisfaction, how will you quantify them? So there are so many aspects of public administration or what we do in the society that is dominated by values. Now this has been a perpetual conflict in the study of public administration, especially in your theory building, that whether the knowledge must come from here or the knowledge must come from here. So this has been a conflict. But positivism is one of the first approaches we used to develop a concrete knowledge in public administration, and these people who use this knowledge or this as the basis, they were known as structuralists and functionalists. Okay, you also call them simply as classical. These are the important terms which we'll encounter everywhere. Why structuralist? See, just now we discussed that the moment you see this, you say it is a duster. So somebody told me that, okay, it erases. Okay, it not only erases, it looks like something. It is a fan, then it looks like something. So the moment I say it is a fan, it must also do something and it must also look like something. So what it looks like, structure. What it does, function. And we can link it both. And that is logical also, that if I have such a big pen, not required. So obviously the structure will also be somewhere defined according to the function. So whatever we need to do, we will arrange it in a particular order or we will use a particular means for that. That is a structure. Now imagine it in the terms of administration. If I say, what is a bureaucracy? What is a civil services? How does it look like? So you'll have to visualize it. How does it look like? How does it look like? If I say administration, how does it look like? Where do you see the government? Where do you see the government? You're criticizing the government, where do you see it? Rashtrapati Bhavan, PMO House, Racecourse Road, where do you see the government? Wherever you see a police barrier, the moment you see a red light, the moment you see a metro, you see the government. That means what? Government is not just a structure, it is also a function. So I can say, yes, government resides somewhere, there is a central secretariat, there is a cabinet secretariat, okay, or there is a secretariat, this is the building which houses the Prime Minister, but that building itself is not the government. So how the administration looks like, how it is arranged, okay, and what is the best arrangement. If we are arranging something, we will go for the best arrangement. So this arrangement will be based on facts. If it is based on facts, we say it will be the best. Fine. So the structuralists are those people who studied this aspect of administration, what it looks like, what it should look like, the best system, okay, how the things will be arranged, procedure, rules, regulations, people, power, authority, how it will be distributed. That is the structuralist. What public administration will do, what best functions it must perform, how they should be performed, all these people are known as functionalists. So positivism as an approach was used initially by these people. All these people you will find in your Unit 2. Dominantly, Unit 2 is about the study of all those people who developed certain theories or certain knowledge based on this logic, and they were called as positivists. Right. So, positivism is dominantly related to the study of public administration from the perspective of facts, identifying or defining certain facts of public administration so that they can be universally applied. When I say fact, so fan is a fan, fan is a fan, fan is a fan, in India also, in US also, anywhere. Same way, they developed certain knowledge which says that they said is visible here also, is applicable here also, here also, here also. So these positivists are the people who believed in universal knowledge of public administration. In developing a universal knowledge so that it can be applied anywhere. So your paper 1 theories are like universal knowledge according to these people, obviously, who believe that these are universal facts of public administration and they can be used anywhere to understand the nature of administration. So if there are people who are dominantly focused on facts, there must also be people who will counter them, who will criticize them. That administration is not just about facts, it is about serving the values like equity, justice, equality, this. So there were certain people who started questioning the knowledge which they developed. Okay. These people are known as, that is another approach, okay, as a counter approach to this one, known as humanist approach or normative approach. It is known as a humanist approach, a normative approach, or also an anti-positivist approach. Now see why it is important to understand, because these two are the most dominant approaches which have changed the entire course of study of public administration. One set of people saying that administration is a science, one set of people saying no, administration is not a science. So positivists obsessed with science of administration, where you will study all the classical traditional theorists. Okay. The anti-positivist or the humanist theorist or the normative theorist, they believe that administration is not a science and every society's administration is different. Okay, society or study of administration must incorporate the study of society, culture, values and norms of the society. They are the people who are known as anti-positivist or humanist or normative approach. Okay. Normative derives its term from the norms. Norms are obviously not laws, they are more value based. Take out the slippers before you enter your house. Take a bath if you come from the journey. These are what? These are certain norms, but they are not the laws. So these are two dominant approaches which have influenced the study of public administration. So under positivism, there are a number of theorists we will study. Just I'll give a list of these people. Okay, unit 2 mostly. Okay. But starting from Wilson. Okay, now see, now you can appreciate actually the Wilson. If you simply start with the Wilson's essay and we say, okay, Wilson talked about this, you will not be able to understand his context, what was his temperament in developing the knowledge of public administration. So Wilson was one of the important contributors, then Goodnow. L.D. White. Now many of these names may not be in your syllabus exactly, but they are asked in the exam. Almost similar idea. Okay, once we have categorized them as this, now it becomes easy for us to understand what would their be ideas be. They might talk about different principles, but ultimately all the principles will be based on the similar idea. Okay. L.D. White, then your Taylor, scientific management and others. or you can write it chronologically. Fayol, Henry Fayol, Max Weber, Gulick, Urwick, Monet, Rayleigh. They are all the theorists who have contributed to the similar idea. Then how about Simon? Okay. Little different, but he also continues the same tradition. Now these are, out of these are the most important ones. And obviously, now this is your typical syllabus of the theories. Okay. The initial development in public administration influenced by all these people. The core of the study of the paper 1 starts with the study of this paper. But why will these people be obsessed with this idea? Was there any context because of which they had to develop this knowledge? For example, today you talk about anti-corruption. Why? Why do you talk about anti-corruption? Nobody was bothered about corruption. Corruption is existent in India since long time. Kautilya in his book Arthashastra writes, it is impossible to taste the honey, or it is impossible not to taste the honey which is at the tip of someone's tongue. His reference is to the corruption in treasury, financial management, the people who are involved. Okay, so corruption has always been in existence. Even after independence, the first act of corruption visible in 1948 itself. Gorwala committee was formed. Okay, even prior to that, okay, Gopal Swami Iyengar committee, number of committees were formed. During the British period also, there was a war secretariat made in the Second World War. To give powers to that war secretariat, they made a law. That law is used today to govern the CBI. So even the Britishers knew that there would be corruption, but under the Britishers, you see, only 2 people were tried for corruption, Clive and Curzon. In 200 years of history of, now see in 60 years history of India's independence, how many people? So you can see logically that corruption has been extended, but why only today the consciousness has grown? Because something happened. What happened? Kejriwal, no doubt, or Anna Hazare, or India Against Corruption movement. That created the consciousness. Okay, whereas Kejriwal happened, he did so many things. His family might be bearing the burden, but for us, it is mostly the crusade against corruption. So when you say something, why did these people so concerned about the study of administration in this particular manner? Okay, because it was the context of industrial development. Though industrial revolution can be mostly attributed to European context, but when we talk about America, this was the phase of the industrial, not revolution, transition. Not American Revolution. American Revolution led to the making of American Constitution. But it was a phase where the industrial revolution or industrial transition was taking place. Okay. And there were certain reasons for that. One was the Second World War. So in the Second World War, America played a crucial role. It emerged as a superpower. It spent a lot of money. And it developed certain plans for the restructuring of various countries. One was the restructuring of Europe, Marshall Plan. Because of that, huge investment was being done by America in the European countries. Colombo Plan, Marshall Plan, Point 4 program, after the economic crisis of 29-33, Great Depression. Fine. So logic is that there were certain contexts which led to the emergence of these theories. So all of them were obsessed with the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution takes place, what happens? Industrialization. But what happens to the society? It will benefit in what sense? Economic sense. But the Industrial Revolution will bring goods and services, maybe qualitative goods and services. But then over the time, what will happen if you have something good and your neighbor does not have? He will demand it. Fine. He will demand. So what happens? Over the time, the demand overrules the supply. This is very natural. And that is a phase, or that phase, when we talk about 1920s to 40s, that phase was the phase of mass production. What is a mass production? Similar type of products or similar type of goods required for mass consumption. So their specific purpose was what? They understood that, okay, now the society can only progress through these industries, and so the progress of the industries was more important. So for industrial productivity, efficiency, growth of the industries, balancing the Industrial Revolution with the needs of the society, they tried to develop this knowledge. So you have to understand the context also. So most of the theories which developed in America or US, influencing the study of administration, okay, they were inspired from the Industrial Revolution, and most of them were management theories, not administration theories. Administrative theories are those theories which generally deal with the study of the systems which are used in governing the societies, whereas they were mostly studying the systems which were used in regulating the industries. So they were more concerned with the industrial organizations than the study of political and administrative organizations. But we are borrowing their knowledge. Okay, logically we have to borrow that knowledge. Why? Because it was a phase of industrial polyarchy. That is a term used by a theorist, Robert Dahl. Industrial polyarchy, what does it mean? Where the industries were actually wielding the power. The government, the state, everything captured by the industrialists. The state cannot perform or function without the understanding of the Industrial Revolution. So industrialization brings change in the manner of production, okay, goods and services, and also it brings change in the society. You see, suddenly people start getting jobs, they become supervisors, they become managers, or they wage earners or laborers or skilled laborers, whatever. Suddenly you see the social structure changes. Earlier people were sitting in their homes, no work. Suddenly they get the work and now they get the income, their lifestyle will change. So the existent relationship which was there in the society, that was also changing after this. So most of them tried to study this, that how or in what way can we govern the societies now which will emerge as a consequence of Industrial Revolution. This will not be the same society which was working under non-industrial revolution. When there was no Industrial Revolution, the society was different. When there is Industrial Revolution, society is different, and that was the purpose of their study. Have you understood this now? Fine. So these are the most important theorists who were inspired by positivism. This theorist comes late. Okay. Most of them are finished by 910 to 1947. Okay, that is the era, okay, in which they dominated the study. Okay, obviously Wilson, 1887 to somewhere 1900. From 1900 the Goodenough dominates, okay, and likewise. So most of them are over by 1947. Okay, they are criticized after this, and anti-positivists come. Okay. But this is the person who revives them back. So Simon is also another very important theorist who is also in the tradition of positivism. So when we are studying this, we will link the Simon there itself. Okay, generally Simon is studied separately, but it is not correct, because Simon has the same logic, same undercurrent as these people. Right. So these are few important theorists which initially we will start with. Obviously after the introduction we do of public administration and all. Fine. Now how do we study these theories? That is also very important. So every theorist you study, imagine Wilson, anybody, any theorist we study, we divide or break up the structure as okay, this will be the basic structure in which we will study these theorists. Without this structure, you cannot understand them, you cannot write the answers related to them. You must follow this structure throughout your preparation and even after that when you write the answer. Context, then concept, then principles, then analysis. Analysis would involve the facts, arguments, comparisons, and the practical aspect, that how whatever theoretically he has said, how it is visible today, whether it is acceptable today or not today, and likewise. So practical aspects will come here. Here we will link with the Indian administration. Then criticisms. This is also a very important part. Unless we criticize them, okay, we cannot actually understand the real nature of their theories. Okay, what are the limitations and gaps that is to be studied. Then the conclusion. So context, concept, principles, analysis, practical aspects, criticism and conclusion. Now they are the aspects by which we will deal with all the theories. Okay. Once you understand them this way, now what you can do, when now let us say you have studied 4 theorists, now what you can do, you can compare them. Your analysis will now improve because you will know he is better than him, why he is not better than him, why did he bring this idea and not this idea, and how this was improved upon by the later theorists. Now you can compare. Okay, once you understand this art, this is not a science, it is an art. Okay, then you can easily write any answer in your exam. Okay, most of the complicated questions come from this area only. Fine. So theorists, mostly the positivists, this will be our starting point. Okay. Now when we talk about these type of people, what is their utility? Everybody wants to be factual. Yes. We want to increase our predictability, reduce the probability. Okay, if I tell you this is the book, read it and become IAS. You are looking for that knowledge. If I say these are 5, 6, 7, 20 books, read all of them and you might find okay some questions. Now this is unpredictable. So everybody wants to know things factually, precisely, rationally. Then what is the utility of these people? Just now just now let us simplify it. Just now we said now Modi or this government may be making number of schemes, bullet train is being run. Okay, and I know there are so many other proposals. Fine. So ultimately the people must be happy, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, but this has not happened. Even if certain things have happened, like the Delhi government claimed, okay, that Mohalla clinics have been very successful, educational standards have improved, okay, the results have drastically improved and likewise they have claimed, and there are facts also, fine. But when we talk about people, society, okay, even the people who are making or taking the decisions, politicians, bureaucrats, okay, none of them are robots, are they? No. So things like corruption, scam, okay, red tapeism, you understand? Delaying the things, taking bribes, misusing the position, authority. Why these things will happen? Because people do not actually follow the rules, regulations or the facts. They deviate from the facts which are given. So they will follow or they may not follow. Most of them not necessarily will follow everything, some things they will leave. So how can we explain this thing? If I say we have made the best administrative system, all the rules and regulations are best, everything is based on facts or factual knowledge, there is no subjectivity, now let us recruit people, we recruited people, and again corruption takes place. How will you explain this phenomena? So apart from the facts, you need some more knowledge to understand the psychology of the individual, to understand his culture, okay, to understand his context, his family, the society he comes from, maybe the region he comes from, or maybe there are certain, non-deliberate factors which might be influencing him. So how will you know all this if you don't have this knowledge? So this knowledge is necessary to explain number of things, events, deviations which take place within the study of public administration. Otherwise, public administration as a subject would remain a subject, not a discipline. It must be independently have the principles and the concepts to explain what is happening within its domain. Otherwise, it will borrow the knowledge from sociology, from philosophy, from political science, and likewise. So these people emerged first to counter them that this is not the absolute knowledge, and there is another aspect of the knowledge which cannot be studied in this way, and that is why their utility increased. Now, few important theorists are there, okay, who are very dominant here. One is Mayo, Foley, Bernard, Argyris, Likert. Now most, they'll come later. Likert, they are the most important ones. Then Maslow, MacGregor, Herzberg. They are not exactly this, but they are influenced by these developments. And many other theorists. I'll give you a list, don't worry. Okay. So these are the people, or they are most dominant ones, who actually influence. Along with them some modern theorists like Peter Drucker, etc. Many people are there. Right. So they now criticize them, or they tried to improve upon them. These are the most dominant ones. So this covers your technically unit 3, okay, unit 6, 7, number of theorists will come from there. Motivation, morale, okay, why to study all that? Because anybody working in the administration will have his own set of value system. So see, from how we are moving in terms of understanding the paper 1, okay, theories. So how theories are evolving? First, studying administration as a system organization. Then studying administration as a complex of human beings. So if I make a simple diagram now, see how I can understand the entire domain of public administration. If I make a simple diagram, let's say this is public administration. So what is it? It is an organization that we are visualizing as a structure, administration. It is also a set of, or a complex aggregate of human beings. You can visualize it as a group of human beings working in a particular setup. That is the organization. So human beings also become part of that. It is also a set of functions. What public administration will do, Tata will not do. What public administration will do, Google will not do. Understanding? So there are some separate set of functions which are performed by administration. So it is now an organization, it is a set of human beings, and it has a set of functions. But try to understand, will this be functioning, or the study of administration, will it be correct? If I just study the administration, its system, the internal aspect, the human beings, and the functions, will it be complete public administration? Now there will be number of aspects related to them, but this administration does not function in isolation. There is a society there is a political system, there is an economic system, there are a number of other countries or the other or different administrative systems which might be influencing it. For example, if the Indian administration wants to develop Northeast region, okay, why it did not or why it could not do so for 60-67 years? We cannot assume that the administration or the government never wanted to develop the Northeastern region. Why they could not do it? The conditions there are different from the conditions in Delhi or different from the conditions in Gujarat or South India, is it or not? That means what? That any administrative study or assuming the public administration being isolated from its environment. Okay, that is not a correct study. So here the ecology or the environment, you can simplify as environment. This is also very, this is now the entire spread of paper 1. It studies public administration as organization, as set of human beings, as set of functions and its consequent environment. Now what will be environment of public administration? Let us say bureaucracy. What is the immediate environment? Politicians. Who are controlling them? Who are influencing them? Who can change their decisions? The political system. Right? So if I simplify this environment, I would say that the first influence on this system will come from the political system. Then to an extent, today there is globalization. We have globalization or not? Are we globalized? How can you say that? You have some facts to support it? A public administration student must have a very strong general studies. Automatically he has or he develops a very strong orientation towards general studies. Because an administrator's role is to provide solutions. So your answer must also reflect that optimism. Even when you give your interview, that should be reflected. You are not a history student, okay, or you are not some other sociology student who is more concerned, or law student, more concerned with the philosophical aspect. You have to give specific solutions. Okay, so how can you say that globalization has happened? The first aspect is the policy. Policy. As a system, we have introduced, as an economic system or a political system, we have introduced new economic policy. It talks about certain things. One of the first industrial policy launched in 1948, and then in 1956, after the Planning Commission comes. Fine. Though there is a marked shift from that 1956 to 1991. That is one fact which we can say. Any other fact? What has been GDP growth rate? You are studying general studies, or you have completed GS and then you are studying optional, or you are studying it simultaneously now. Simultaneously. You know what is GDP? At least you must be reading in the newspaper. So what was the GDP then and what is the GDP now?
It was around 2, now it is around 6.
It was 2, 1991.
Around 2.
2.
Right now around 6.
2.57 around. From in 2001, it doubled. 2011, as claimed by the UPA1, what was it? The peak came around 7.8%. RBI projected it to be 7.4%. And global GDP growth rate, average growth rate was somewhere 6%. India was ahead of that 6.4% average. And that's why we claim that we are one of the fastest growing economy. We cannot claim it like this. So the logic is we are globalized today. So has the globalization impacted the way we are governing our society, the way our problems are emerging, the way we are tackling those problems? Has it changed or not? Because globalization has brought about economic change. Just now we said that per capita income or GDP has increased. Will it translate into per capita income? Now there is more money with the government and the society. So obviously it might have been distributed. That is what we assume. India is a welfare society, democratic society, so this money would have been distributed amongst the people. So we may safely assume that, okay, poverty has decreased, per capita income has increased, okay, number of people who have now surplus money to buy goods and services, it has increased. So poverty, which was somewhere 48% when we started the globalization, I am talking about absolute poverty, around 48%. Today it is claimed to be, how much? 20
crore people are based in poverty.
No, what percentage I am talking about? How much do we claim today? Around 23%. Okay. But those reports may be false, we don't know. Okay. In essence, we can say at least 30 crore people or 30% people, not 30 crore, 30% people may still be poor. But definitely more people are above the poverty line today compared to what it was there in 1950s, 1990s and today. So what happens when the people's income increase? The investment increases, the expenditure increases, their investment in certain consumption patterns change, they will eat good food, they will buy white goods and likewise. So this changes the way administration deals with them. Education increases, more and more people will opt for higher education or literacy, so their consciousness will also change. That means what? That globalization is also one of the important factors which might be affecting the administration today. This is the economic system. Today we talk about the mandir, okay, we talk about community. Some people say India is intolerant. Okay. We also talk about the conflicts in Jammu and Kashmir, the imposition of AFSPA in northeastern states, okay, and likewise Naxalism problem. Fine. Now see, when we are talking about all these things, okay, do we assume that India is a culturally diverse country? It is a fact that India is culturally diverse. Okay. The way the government proceeds towards certain or different regions, will it be different or it will be same? No, it should be same. Because government has to treat every region equally. But now see, what is the logic? That certain regions are underdeveloped and certain are developed. So if the government is allocating the grant to Gujarat and to, let's say, the Jharkhand, will it create a disparity or not? So relative backwardness of Jharkhand is not because of lack of industrialization, it has huge natural resources, okay, and the growth of prosperity of Gujarat is not just because of industrialization, okay, it must be something else also. The people are more investor friendly there. Okay. No offenses to people from Bihar and UP, okay, but because I belong to the Uttarakhand or UP, erstwhile UP only. So people who want to invest in Jharkhand or Bihar or UP, they will think many times. People who want to invest in Gujarat, maybe Tamil Nadu or some other areas, they will not think much. People who want to invest in West Bengal and Kerala, many times they will think, now at least, but not relatively with why this happens. So the administration or the way administration is functioning is also influenced by your culture, or at least your socio-cultural aspect. The kind of system we have designed, that is also a consequence of society and culture. We opted for a democracy. We should have gone for some other system. And again we opted for a parliamentary democracy which was similar to the Britishers' model. So why did we go for that? Why don't we go, or why didn't we go for this presidential system, which would have been much better? At least American model, more progressive and liberal. Because it was again because of this reason. We cannot easily break away from the past. We have developed an affection, okay, and a need, inevitability of that system. So you cannot stop administration and say, no, 10 years now I will make another administration and then I will govern the society. Impossible. So you had to continue it. Right? So you cannot rule out the impact of society and culture. Now see, this is the degree of influence may be reducing but it has an impact on the public administration. So now the scope of paper 1 is defined now this way, that we study PubAd as organization, then we study public administration as collection of human beings, then we study it as function, and then we study the influence of various factors and the relationship of the administration with them. It is both ways, how they influence us and how they influence. So administrative system also can change the growth and development of a particular area. The area can also influence the administration. Okay, you try to bring any administrative reforms or industrial reforms in the eastern UP, impossible. If you want to do any big business there, impossible. Mafias will come, extortionists will come, and likewise see what happened to the real estate in Mumbai. Though other things flourished, but the real estate, even though we can say market mechanism, it flourished, but huge fear, okay, loss of investment, capital loss in the real estate sector because of the dominance of certain groups. So you cannot rule out that these factors will influence and it will also influence. Now this also becomes one area of study. This area of study is treated separately, known as the ecological approach. So likewise you see, to study this, certain approaches developed, to study this, certain approaches, to study this and to study this. These collectively are known as the approaches to the study of public administration, because the phenomena is public administration. So one study is one aspect, the other study is the other aspect. Aggregate study is known as the study of public administration. So in essence, the entire paper 1 revolves around these. Now imagine that we are studying the public administration and its cultural context, its internal aspect, both we are studying. But which public administration are we studying? American. Whatever knowledge given in paper 1, it is American. Now if I want to test this knowledge, what will I do? I will implement it in India, for example, or in non-Western context. So just now I said that most of this development was somewhere around 19 or till 1940s, 1945 over. After 1945, what happened? Number of developing countries became independent. Now they also wanted to progress, they also wanted to grow, they also wanted economic prosperity. So what happened? Now these countries came to the rescue. That we have ruled you, exploited you, but now we'll help you grow. So Commonwealth was created. We must be knowing. So a process, Commonwealth created, and emergence of multilateral institutions took place. World Bank, IMF. What was their need of these institutions? What was the need for creating these institutions? United Nations, World Bank, or League of Nations? No, it cannot be that good intention. Prosperity of the whole world. Okay, there are two reasons. One, economic, the other, political. The political reason would be attributed to the emergence of Cold War, American hegemony, how it needed to be protected. But I am taking a pessimistic view, a critical aspect, that okay, it was probably because the economic reason was, it was obvious, that these countries which have been looted by the erstwhile colonial rulers, okay, now they will become independent, now they will be sovereign. Okay, most of these developed countries or so-called developed countries almost now industrialized. So industrialization has stabilized in their countries, where they will find the markets for their product. Okay, resource, labor, where earlier by force they used to capture people and take it to the plantations. Now what to do? So they wanted access to resource also, access to labor also, okay, and likewise. So there were certain other reasons, though obviously they camouflaged it as that these institutions are going to equalize the power in the world now. And this is what is happening today also. So I'm not a communist, first it should be very clear. Okay. So Okay, so till the age of 30 you must be communist, so that some ideologies and principles develop in your life. But after 30 you should be capitalist, otherwise your wife will send you out of the house. And so, okay, so I'm not communist, that should be very clear. So logic is that once these institutions emerged, now what they did, they tried to change the relationship between the developed and the developing. They became buffers, shock absorbers for this. So one of the prime reasons was that after the 1945, now the growth of these multilateral institutions, now they took the lead in developing these societies. So these erstwhile colonial powers, how they wanted to interact with these their erstwhile colonies through these institutions. And because it was an arrangement of convenience only. Okay, why? Because obviously they were much more powerful. So assuming that we were equal to them, it was a misconception. And we knew it. So that is why Nehru followed NAM, non-aligned movement. So see how the global politics changed, and because of that the governing or number of problems in governing started. Many people started migrating from these countries in the developed countries for obviously something known as gold rush in America. Have you heard of the term? Gold rush in US. Everybody thought that America is the destination, preferred destination. Its superpower image had influenced the entire world. And likewise, so you see the theories which were able to understand how the administrative process and functioning in America is going on or explain it, now they were not able to explain it because all these massive changes going on. Also their perspective was not third world perspective. They could not understand the realities of the third world countries or the developing countries so called. So they had to accommodate for now new theories. Okay, they had to provide now new understanding of these countries. So there emerged a comparative approach. This is again, or it defines the scope of study. So once we are studying paper 1, it is mostly the study of this thing. But over the time when we reach our unit 6, 7, 8, what happens? Till that time you see 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. The non-Western countries are, or they become dominant in the world politics, in the world economy, okay, and also they were preferred destination of goods and services for the developed countries likewise. So there was a need to study them also. So the comparative approach developed to compare the American public administration with, or the developed countries administrative system with the non-Western development. So after unit 6 onwards you will see the scope of public administration now expands, goes beyond the study of American public administration. And then you will find the elements coming from the Indian administration, from the non-Western administration. What were the models and theories developed by various thinkers to understand that how we can compare the non-Western with the Western country. So in toto, when we are dealing with the study of paper 1, okay, we have to tread very cautiously. Every concept must be known. Okay, linkages must be understood. There are numerous undercurrents, okay, which have to be linked. But it is only possible when we are doing a holistic study of paper 1. Because the examiner, when he gives the question, he does not categorize it unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, unit 4. But these are the core concepts which will be used. So our initial class, which will start maybe Monday, okay, or Tuesday. Monday we will deal with paper 2 also, what aspects of paper 2 we have to study. Then from then onwards you can say we will start with the vocabulary of public administration or paper 1 vocabulary. Okay, you don't need to go and refer any book first of all. I will tell you what books to refer over the time. Okay, if you want any references for paper 1, yes, you can buy a few books. Okay, at least you must have some books so that you can tell your children that okay, this is the book I studied and this made me IAS. Okay, at least you must have some token of your hard work. Okay. So there are certain books which you can refer. At least keep them as a reference. This is the IGNOU. Okay, IGNOU book. Okay. Okay, if you are just beginning or you have not read anything in PubEd, okay, kindly read the BA program of IGNOU. Take it, it will help you. You'll get the photocopies anywhere in Rajendra. You can just keep that with you. BA program of IGNOU. Then a simple book like Arora and Goyal. Now why I am saying this, because this is basically paper 2 book, but wherever we will link number of theories with the Indian administration, I can give you a reference that kindly refer this page. This fact is now being used here. So you can keep these two as basic books, one for paper 2, this for paper 1. Okay. Now once you are through with this, let's say maybe 1.5 months, 2 months, then you have to study Mohit Bhattacharya. This is dominantly for paper 1. Don't study it unless you understand everything in class, because it will demotivate you. Once you study in the class, you can read it very easily. Mohit Bhattacharya has 2 books. Okay. One is New Horizons of PubEd. Okay, this is the book, must book, you must have. Then one is Social Theory and Development Administration. This book can be used for paper 1 as well as paper 2. So this book is generally for a very expansive reading of PubEd. When you understand various terms, process, entire concept of public administration, then you can use it as value addition for your answers. Fine. So when you are reading this IGNOU BA, it will cover many theories, whatever we will do. Okay. But along with this, if you add one more book, MPA 12, Masters of Public Administration, IGNOU booklet number 12. This has most of the theories. Masters of Public Administration. Apart from this, don't take the books. Whereas whatever reference we are going to use, I'll tell you, but that will be all dictated in the class, explained and dictated both. Fine. So in the class we will have references from Nicholas Henry, Mohit Bhattacharya, all the 5 books, then Stephen Robbins. It is not for you. I am just saying these are the references we are using. That means obviously you don't need to buy anything apart from this. Okay. Then there is a book by Coombs, okay, Organizational Behavior. So Mohit Bhattacharya, this is important, this is quite important. Then Administrative Theories by Prasad. One is Prasad and Prasad. The other is by Sapru. There is a book by Maheshwari. That is not good. No need to refer. In fact, you don't need to refer it. We'll do all this. Then there is a book on CPA, Comparative Public Administration. This is also to be read, but again dealt in the class, so you don't require it separately. Comparative Public Administration by R.K. Arora. This is a very good book. And then there is a book by Stillman. Stillman basically is for the management principles. Then there is, sometimes the questions are asked, okay, complicated questions are asked, so they are not directly in any of the books. Okay, but there is an online store known as JStore. The journals available online. Okay, if you are already subscribed to it, it is good. If you are part of any higher institution like JNU, IIT or whatever, universities, central universities, you might access to this. Or if your friends are there, access this through them. Otherwise, individually don't do it. but we will bring this in reference. Then second ARC. I am talking about paper 1 only. So second ARC will be integrated wherever required. Apart from this, there is another area, administrative law, where there is technically no good book on administrative law. Okay, you might find or you might see the booksellers selling you IP Messi. Don't buy it. It is a useless book. It is for law students, not for PubAd students. Okay. Only 40 pages of this book are worth reading for you. So it is not necessary for you. If you have to deal with administrative law, go to Wikipedia. Simply refer to the links given. If you want to go and do your independent study, don't read anything beyond that, because this will be enough for this. Okay. Only if you have a microstructure. So we'll keep making a microstructure. I've given you a lesson plan. It might be you have access to that. Okay. So almost 4.5, 5 months is there, but it is only symbolic. When we will link the various topics, okay, it will be around not more than 4 months. Okay, but there is a test, there is regular discussion, so that time frame is given. Okay. Our course will be technically for 4.5 months, not more than that. Right. If you keep doing it regularly. Okay. As far as tests and questions are concerned, in the class every day we will do certain questions based on what we have studied. Okay. Those questions you can write. Don't force me to evaluate it. I will check it, but I will not give marks for that. Okay. Every topic when finished, okay, there is a test mentioned in your schedule. Go and see it, or I'll ask him to give you on Monday. So in your schedule, go and see, everywhere test is mentioned. Whenever you read that area, your class notes would be sufficient to write the test. But if you want, you can supplement from these books. But beyond this, you might not require anything. Kindly read the second ARC. You have time. You will not be appearing this year, obviously, next year. So you have enough time. If you get access to second ARCs, I'll give you second ARCs gist, not the summary. Okay, one we have edited ourselves. It is not the summary simply. Okay, you can read it. I'll be giving to you within 2 days all the booklets that you have. So you can read it through that. Or if you have access to the ebook of ARC, kindly read ARC slowly and slowly. You require it. Okay, many people question the viability of ARC because now it is quite old. 2005 it was formed, and 2008-9 it submitted the report. But the logic is there is no other reform commission formed after that. The first ARC was formed in 1966. That does not reduce the utility of the recommendation. So wherever you have to put a recommendation, or you have to at least highlight that these are the changes done by the government now, you use the ARC. Plus ARC covers most of the governance issues. Disaster management, paper 3. You have law and order, internal security. Okay. Then citizen-centric administration, e-governance, again GS paper 2. You are covering civil society, media, everything is covered under that. And the best aspect of second ARC is what? It gives you content. You read any notes, buy it from the market, take a book, what has happened? They have just copied it from the internet. You get the same regressive content. Whereas second ARC has studied numerous reports and committees, and then it has given the content. So kindly read second ARC, it is going to help you. Then there is a collection of journals or collection of, you can say, papers under the IIPA. Okay, so we have a huge collection. Not everything is required for you. So I would be giving you photocopies of that, as and when necessary for you to read, but kindly read it. Your essay, your ethics paper, your GS paper 2, even your certain questions, society and all related in paper 1 also, you can solve or write very well using those notes. So don't ignore the IIPA, kindly read it. There are a number of summaries available outside also. No need to buy you, no need to waste your money. Okay, you're already doing so much. Okay. So, okay, don't waste it on unnecessary compilation. That is the first step to rationalize your preparation. So if you think that you will develop a library and then you will become an IAS, it is a mistake. IAS is about strategy. It's not about just knowing too much. Okay, how we present that knowledge. So if you simplify, in spite of knowing too much, that is the best way. Sometimes you may simplify because you don't know. So ignorance is also bliss at times, but I don't think so it is in UPSC. Okay, because you have to deal with multiple areas. So at the interview level also they will come to know that, okay, you might have faked your mains answer. So it is not possible for you to qualify mains. Pre you can definitely, even if you memorize certain facts. And so don't be obsessed with too much of notes, too much of books, not really. Yes, you are at liberty to acquire any other notes, compare them, read them. If you get anything additional, there is no problem. And so see you then on Monday. You have any doubts, you can ask. I'm not extending because if we enter now, then you will start abusing me. The first day itself, this person is hammering our brains. But no doubt, the public administration students have to become little strong. But this is one of the best subjects you will once you start learning, you will understand. Okay, it has multiple benefits. I would not say these many marks in ethics. No, it is not. It is something only, these are all commercial slogans. It is not like that. But yes, by understanding PubEd, you will understand at least the true nature of administration. So your perception towards various questions will change. That is the best thing will happen to you. If you write an essay, probably your analysis would be much better than anybody writing. That is the only thing that PubEd contributes. Once you explain the interviewer that, okay, this is what has happened, this is what the policy is. So your explanation might be better than the others. Okay, otherwise, we don't say, okay, these many marks in essay. No, it's not like that. You cannot precisely quantify that by studying PubEd you can score 80 marks more in ethics. It cannot be like this. If you study better, obviously you can score good marks in PubEd itself. So keep your target to 300, work for it. You can score 340 also, no problem. Fine. And by the time you give, maybe there would be some top ranker from PubEd. This year, how many rankers are there from PubEd? Oh, there are many. Not necessarily in top 50, but 87, 97. Okay, they both were, one was the test series student here. Okay, other was the QIP student here. Then 226 and like so many people. So don't worry, you want only one seat. Okay, fine. All the best to you. See you on Monday.